think that it's important that as we go through this process, we make it as rational and as clear as possible. So people understand that as they're paying gas tax, that it would be good for that gas tax to go into transportation infrastructure. I actually said in my remarks that there will be new revenue tools, and those will be in the budget. Today I was talking about the repurposed revenue, but we will be bringing in new revenue tools.
$29 billion, $15 billion for the Toronto-Hamilton area, $14 billion for infrastructure, roads, bridges, those kinds of things for the rest of Ontario. Candice Malcolm is the Ontario Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and joins us now. Candice, what are your thoughts on the whole prospect of taxes for transit?
Well, Pat, you know I really despise the idea of new taxes to pay for all this transit. It's basically just massive government irresponsibility over time, and they're shirking responsibility, so it's their own problem they're in this mess. But I actually was happy with Premier Wynne's announcement yesterday. I know that might sound surprising, but I actually think it was a great initiative. What she said yesterday essentially is that instead of imposing new taxes or coming up with new revenue tools, all they're going to do is redirect existing gas taxes, so taxes that are already levied and imposed, and just put them into a fund that's going to fund half of it to subways and the other half to roads and bridges. It's actually very similar to what the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has been calling for. We've long asked for a Gas Tax Accountability Act so that all of the revenues raised off of gas taxes, diesel taxes, HST on gas taxes, as well as driver and registration vehicle fees, all go into one fund, and that fund gets dedicatedly earmarked towards infrastructure. So
it's almost like it relates to transit, gasoline, and therefore spend it on transit. And there's a transparency.
Right. It seems to sort of equal each other out. You know, the more people are driving, the more we need to spend on upgrading roads, building new roads, and keeping up with the critical infrastructure in the province. The government has neglected doing this for decades, and that's again why we have terrible congestion in and around cities in Ontario. So you know, the idea of making it transparent, allowing taxpayers to see exactly where the money is going, and treating gas sort of as a user fee for drivers. You know, they're using these roads, and the money should get used back in it. Now, you know, the problem, Pat, is that the devil's in the details. Premier Wynne only announced a part of the funding for her big move project to build all this infrastructure. The rest is going to come in the budget. We don't even know when the budget's coming down. And, you know, Premier Wynne getting out and leaking her own budget and giving us parts of what's going to be in there and not really fully disclosing the rest of it is a bit of a problem. I fear that some of the funding is going to end up going towards debt. They're going to use debt to finance the rest of their transit projects here. But from what she said yesterday, having a dedicated fund, I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, and let's just do the math a little bit. I'm looking at $29 billion over a decade, give or take, say, $2 or $3 billion per year that they're spending. $1.3 billion a year is the gas taxes you're indicating, and the HST is about $130 million. So that shortfall is what you're referencing. What about this whole prospect of what they call green bonds?
I find it amusing that they're sort of color coding all of their debt now, just because, you know, they have so much of it. So let's call some of it green. You know, when you look at outstanding bonded debt currently in Ontario, if you break it down for every man, woman, and child, it's over $20,000. It's $20,116 for everyone in current outstanding bonded debt. So when it comes to the option of going out to more bond markets and borrowing more money, it's a terrible idea. It's just simply pushing responsibility for paying for this to the next generation of taxpayers. So, you know, if you're going to pay for it, at least come up with a consensus and a way to pay for it now. Don't push it, kick it down the road for the next people, because they're already going to inherit, you know, the hundreds of billions of dollars that the Ontario government has drowned itself in debt over the last few decades. So I don't really see how the government can go and find new markets and new bond buyers to pay for this. It's really just another way of saying we're going to pay for it through debt.
Or they kick it up to the feds. We'll have to save that comment, though, Candice, for a second, because we got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back.
You know, if we really want to address the transportation issue, you have to address both transit. We'll do that through subways and improved GO service, and improve our highway system, because people often will do both. If you want somebody who is going to increase taxes, fees, or tolls, the good news is you've got two choices. That's what Kathleen Wynne stands for in the Liberals and the NDP. The only argument they have in the House now is which tax to increase.
Tim Hudak making a point, though. Taxes, fees, and tolls out there. And Candace Malcolm is still here as well. And Candace, one thing that I did note in her statement yesterday is she, quote, emphasized a, quote, more serious federal partner. I mean, if they're not going to take on debt on the provincial level, they want the feds to take it on.
Right. They forget that there's only one taxpayer. So whether they're hitting us up through, federal means or provincial, it's the same pocket. And it also neglects to mention that the federal government just announced its big new Building Canada infrastructure plan, which dedicates and earmarks historically high new levels for transit and all kinds of other funding. So they already are getting more money from the feds than they had in the past. I think that's sort of just the premier saying, going cap in hand to the feds saying, can you please help us, please pay for this, because we don't have the will to actually figure out the problem here in Ontario.
Yeah, exactly. You wonder if the people actually see through all this, though. Gina Phillips, you've had some online response, for instance.
Yeah, one of the first comments I saw was someone saying, what about the gas plants? I mean, I'm sure it's, why don't you put that $1 billion towards, this $29 billion plan? And anyway, people bringing that up, not sure if it's, actually resonating very much, though. However, others outside of Toronto concerned that this transportation money will go to Toronto and they won't end up feeling the benefits of where their taxpayers' money is going. Ted Hennington says Wynne's ill-advised transportation strategy is trying too hard to move votes, not commuters. So they see this as just a plot to get in the good books with Ontarians. And Antonella Artuso, actually just 7 minutes ago, she's with Sun Media. She tweeted, Premier Kathleen Wynne says she won't cancel programs to pay for transportation. Public told to wait for budget to see how gas tax is replaced. So she's keeping up with all the details at Queen's Park, and you can follow her at Sun2s. Back to you guys.
Okay, Gina and Candace, I guess that your ears perked up as soon as you heard that.
Well, I think Gina raised a couple of great points. This is a government that's just wasted money left, right, and center. When you look at how they've managed the energy industry, throwing away $1 billion and canceling a gas plant, why would we want to redirect all this money and enable them to do another, big pet project that might end up the same way as the gas plant or a number of other,
or Orange or eHealth or on and on and on.
Exactly, the Pan Am Games. I mean, it's sort of every one of their big signature pet projects seems like this Liberal government just manages to completely waste, throw money, good money after bad. Even with the transit, that their background building, they built a Presto card. It was supposed to be sort of a credit card that you could use to get on.
I have one of those
subways.
things.
Yeah, well, they spent $900 million trying to develop this thing. Any private company could have done it for a quarter of that price. But it's just typical of this government to
Truth be told, it doesn't work all that well either.
Right.
I mean, it's convenient, but half the time it doesn't work.
Right, and there's been endless stories of people putting money on and then their card being empty
Right.
or getting the wrong balance. So, when it comes to very simple things, this government just manages to screw it up to big proportions. So I don't really think that people in Ontario are keen to open up their wallets and give Premier Wynne another opportunity, to create another scandal.
But they are getting pressure from all kinds of levels. So look at the mayoral race, for instance, in the city of Toronto. All of them want changes to transit or more transit, and all that costs money. And they're going to lean on the provincial government as well.
Right, and I think that's another great example, something that Gina brought up as well, that it's all kind of pandering to the electorate come election time and voting time. The polls and the areas with the biggest pull are the ones that are going to get rewarded with subways, as we saw in Scarborough when they had their by-election. The whole process has been very politicized, very corrupted. I think it's a good idea for the government to just sort of move past this idea. Yesterday's announcement, just using current revenues to just redirect them, organize things a little bit better, is a much better idea than coming up with big grand plans and trying to tax Ontario an extra $50 billion.
By the same token, I mean, they could say that we're redirecting gas taxes, but they could jack up gas taxes as well. We don't know what's going to be in this budget.
That's a great point. We don't know. And that's part of the problem, again, with Premier Wynne leaking her own budget, getting ahead of the budget, instead of putting it all together in a package as we've typically seen. this government has decided to leak it systematically over the weeks leading up to the budget. So we're just getting little tidbits, little bits of information to fill up the news cycle, and then we'll get slammed with all the details whenever the budget comes down.
Yeah, fool the electorate for the time being.
Seems like it.
Don't give out a lot of details on that stuff. Well, Candace, we'll see what it has in a few weeks' time, I'm sure. Candace Malcolm is the Ontario Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.